I can't help but think about this idea of that you're writing 3 books a year, two to three per year. And you know that some of those aren't going to be published. So what becomes of the brokenhearted? What does that bother you? Is there some hope when you put those on a shelf of not to be published that eventually the market's going to change and then I'll whip that thing off the shelf and we'll find a home for it? Or was it I had my experience, I got what I needed, and I'm gratified, so it's okay that this isn't one that's going to find readers?
It's definitely more the latter, and that when I think I said earlier, when I sit down to write a book, maybe I didn't say this, but I always sit down and write a book for one person, right? That's me. I'm trying to satisfy, in many cases, the 12 or 13-year-old reader that I was growing up. And so if I can do that, then it's a worthwhile experience. Also, of course, I think you learn something from everything that you write. The ones that get published, and certainly you learn from the ones that don't get published. And whether or not, I mean, obviously I've got, 10, 11, 12 completed novels sitting on the hard drive that I'm the only person who's ever read. And if they ever see the light of day, it'll be because I think I went back to them with fresh eyes and made them better. It just wasn't their time. It wasn't my time to make them the best novel that they can be right now. And yeah, if the market changes and all of a sudden, let's imagine that I've got, this superhero novel waiting in the wings, and superheroes should become popular because they're not yet, then, I'll just dust that off and throw it out there. I forget which book it was, whether it was Buick 8 or something like that, but it was a Stephen King novel, and I think it was after he retired the second time, or maybe it was after he retired the first time. But he published it, and in his foreword, he's like, this has been sitting around, and I didn't think anybody wanted to read it. But then I'm like, you know what? People will read anything, And he didn't actually say that, but I'm sort of paraphrasing, right? Where he's like, I know it's going to get published, and because I'm Stephen King, I know I'm going to make money off of it. So maybe there's merit in me going back to it and seeing if I can turn it into something that I'm proud of, right? And, obviously he did. But at the same time, it's kind of one of those things where, like, you get it. I imagine you do get into a position, if you're incredibly successful, where it doesn't matter if the quality drops off, you're still going to find your audience and you're still going to sell 1 million copies. The question is, do you have the integrity, right, to produce something that you're still proud of? And I don't think I would want to put anything else out there that I couldn't talk about and say, yeah, this was as good as I could do at the time, right? I don't know that I have yet. I think I've tried as hard as I can on every book that's gone out there. Are they perfect? No. God, they all have problems. So flawed, right? I'm still learning so much. But I think at the time they were the best books that I could write, and hopefully they'll get better. Maybe they'll get worse. Who knows? I'm not going to stop trying.
It was, I think, Blaze. It was a Richard Bachman novel after Bachman had been proven to be Stephen King, came out, and he had something like that in the foreword where it's like, this is a novel that I wrote forever ago, and I've cleaned it up a little bit. And I'm like, no, you should have left it in the trunk, man. I'm glad you wrote that and you learned the lessons that you needed to know that let you go on to write The Shining and all the other classics. But right. I could have lived my whole life without reading Blaze. Yeah. It would have been fine. And what happens then if upon having lived a long and successful life, extended artificially by at least 100 years, but then after that, your great-grandchildren say, hey, we're the great-grandchildren of the great novelist John David Anderson, and he's got this trunk of novels that he never published, and wouldn't you know it, rent's due, let's get those bad boys out there. That bother you, or you don't care at that point because you're someplace else where this is no longer a concern?
I've actually never considered this question, but I do Now that you're saying it, my initial impulse is to say, yeah, great grandchildren, go make a mint, right? Go milk as much out of this as you possibly can. But the way you phrase it makes me think that that's not the reaction I should have. That maybe I should, even beyond the grave, be concerned about my own artistic integrity.
It sounds more benevolent if you want your grandkids to live a nice life, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is. And again, it's impossible to know what, future generations will consider to be fantastic works of art, or even just good beach reads. But I want to say that if it's good enough, I'll really fight for it, right? And I think you can find a way to get it out there into the world. And maybe I'll look back on some of these things that I've written that I haven't published, and I'll make them good enough. Who knows? But yeah, it's hard for me to think about the idea of lasting legacy. I know that's one of the things that we as authors kind of go into it for, is that sort of elusive pipe dream that, yeah, 3 generations from now, our books will still be on the shelf. But there's so many books on the shelf, Rob. I mean, I walk into a bookstore now and I'm just like, how are all these people publishing novels? Like, where does all this stuff come from? And how does anybody read even 1 gazillionth of the stories that are out there, let alone manage to float to the top and get read by millions and millions of people? And so I've gotten to the point where, like, fleeting success is really what I'm content with. Like, I'm going to keep this train chugging for as long as I can, until I run it off the cliff. And then we'll try something else, and if I should get lucky and write something that does stand the test of time, or gets turned into a movie, right? Then that's icing on the cake. But it's not the be all to end all.
I've just given myself that already, because what difference does it make? I just assume that the moment I die, my books will immediately jump in tremendous value. Everyone will read them. They will be taught in every classroom. And if I'm wrong, who cares? Because I frequently think there's 2 possibilities. Either William Shakespeare has no idea we're reading his stuff. I died completely unaware. Like, I wish I had made more money, or I guess I was really King James the whole time, whatever theory he subscribed to, and then he dies and he has no idea, or he is in some afterlife looking down and like, this is really satisfying, and this afterlife is so uninteresting to me that I'm just focused on those present day humans and making sure that they're writing the best possible term papers. And Kenneth Branagh, you better make a good adaptation of this one, buddy. I imagine that if he is in an afterlife, he's writing new plays. He's not focused on what we're doing with the old stuff.
For sure, yeah. No, I mean, I guess there are probably ways that we could guarantee our longevity and our infamy. Maybe if we do die tragically, and some kind of mirror episode that directly translates to something that's happened in our own novels, that would be cool. I don't know that I necessarily want to set that process in motion just yet. I don't know. Fame, like, I'm not famous. I don't know if you consider yourself famous. Kids will ask me that at school visits all the time. They're like, wow, are you famous? Did I just meet a famous person? And I just tell them the truth. I'm like, no, nobody knows me. You want to tell the truth? I've had people recognize me on the street once. It was at a librarians conference, and it was right outside of the convention center, right? And so, it's got to be a very specific audience at a very specific place and time, and then maybe 1 in a million chance I'm going to get recognized. So yeah, I think for most writers, it's probably not about fame or living beyond just what they produce at the time. It's about that aching need, right, to tell the story, and then hopefully that connection with that reader that comes after, where some kid just says, "I loved your book. It's the first book I've read all year," right? And you're like, oh, that's it. Like, that's the whole reason I do it, right? was to get you to sit down.
Those grandchildren are going to look at those 10 novels and, you know, they just need a little bit of touching up. Fortunately, we have Granddad's old toothbrush. Let's just clone him and get him to come back and touch these up. So problem solved.
Well, provided the aliens do show up to provide that kind of intense cloning technology, then yes, we can pull that off. Oh man! So who would you bring back?
Oh, if I could bring back anybody, I mean, aside from let's bring
off,
kill him again. Once isn't enough. Oh man, that's you have stumped me. I guess maybe Shakespeare, just to solve that mystery and see. That's too much responsibility. I should not be the person to decide what we're going to do with the cloning technology. You pick. Who will we bringing back?
Oh, I mean, does it have to be an author?
Yeah, it can be Genghis Khan if you really want to spice things up. Whatever.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's too easy to say Einstein, right? But you know, to have the kind of mind that just solved problems that were previously unsolvable, also with sort of that humility, humanity, and wit, and you know, I think we could use more people like that in the world, geniuses with a heart. And I know there are a lot of them out there. I feel like I have the heart. I just like the genius. So, you know, that's one possibility. I don't know. A.A. Milne? I don't know anything about A.A. Milne. I just know I love Winnie the Pooh. And I feel like we could use some more Winnie the Pooh stories too. So,